So, let's begin. I'm curious, if I could show you in this 40-minute piece the nearest thing the FBI have to a Jedi mind trick, would that be of any interest? Yeah, just a few. Well, we'll see if we can squeeze it in. We'll squeeze it in. I've got the boring stuff to do as well. No. We'll just do the Jedi mind trick and some reasons for doing it, if that's okay. And to maybe get you doing a bit of it, or the next level up from the basic Jedi. Is that okay? So, I'm Judy. I've just arrived this afternoon from London after a very exciting day with delayed flights and all the rest of it. I'm afraid I missed the talks earlier. I've just heard Woody's talk, and I'm really, really quite intimidated to be on stage after Woody, who's such a big name and has got such valuable stuff to share. And I think I've got some high-quality stuff for you as well. I'm wondering, is there a specific context in your life where it would be useful to you to get them to get it? Where, frustratingly, they're just not getting your message? The wife? Anyone? Any advance on the wife? Any other contexts? The kids? Teammates? Anyone else? Parents? At IT? And IT. Parents and IT and the kids and the wife and the colleagues and teammates. Anyone else? Clients? And the customers. So there are a few contexts where it would be useful to get them to get it. Excellent. Hold that specific context, whatever it is for you, in mind as we go through this. I'm going to be building a little bit on what Woody was just saying as well. How many people were in Woody's talk just now? Pretty much everybody. Excellent. So we've already got the authority figure. Woody's dad. Let's just go with the authority figure. Woody's dad. Good things happen to those who pay attention. So we're going to be building on that idea. Another way of putting it, Stephen Covey. If I were to summarize in one sentence the single most important principle I've learned in the field of interpersonal relations, it would be this: seek first to understand and then to be understood. That's where we're coming from in this chunk. Very quickly, I also want to show you this. Collaborative influence. This is the collaborative influence cycle. This is how influence really works. When you're influencing people you're collaborating with. This model here is based on some work by a group of academics at Harvard who produced a book called Collective Genius. They did a load of studies of places like Pixar and Google and all these very well-known creative collaborative organizations. And this is a slightly stylized version of the model they came up with. Because collaborators, people working together, can't get away with just talking fast at each other. Collaborators, people working together, have to do something different. They have to start by paying attention. Just as Woody's dad said, good things come to people who pay attention. Then they guide attention. And we'll come back to that idea in just a moment. But only once they've paid attention and perhaps guided attention do they say their piece. Excuse me. I've lost my voice. The thing is that the more you try to influence someone just by talking at them, the more you'll fail. The more you try to not influence, or the more you appear not to try to not influence, the more you listen and support people to do their best thinking, the more you pay attention, the more you guide attention before you speak, the more influential you'll become. In other words, in order to get them to get it, it is essential to get them. We have to understand the people we want to influence in order to influence them. Is this making sense? Straightforward? Obvious? It should be obvious, and yet, if paying attention is so useful, so valuable, and so simple and so obvious, why is it so unusual? Why are people not doing it? The answer, it seems to me, is that it requires some effort. Just as this next activity that you're going to do is going to require a small amount of effort on your part. In the next couple of minutes, you're going to get together with somebody close to you in this room. This is why you need to sit near each other. And the first person is going to talk about something that's important to them. And the other person, their job is to encourage them to keep talking, but without using any words. Easy? So what you're just going to nod and smile and maybe make eye contact and gestures and and just keep them talking for 2 minutes without using any words. And then at the end of 2 minutes, I'll give the signal. Are we using this as a system here? When you see my hand go up, you put your hand up and stop talking? Okay, at the end of 2 minutes, I'll give the signal, and then we'll swap roles. Simple? Okay, off you go. Yeah. And please swap roles. How was that? What did you notice when you were being listened to? The time passed really fast when you were talking. Lady over there, we've actually got a microphone rather than me automatically repeating what you said. My friend there has got a microphone. Lady at the back there? Hmm? So it was easier to gather your thoughts when someone was really listening like that. And lady, just a couple of rows back there.
Maybe because I'm used to being interrupted all the time, suddenly I had time to talk without being interrupted.
Yeah, so slightly uncomfortable because you're used to being interrupted all the time. And how was it when you were doing the listening? Gentleman at the back there? Or person at the back, I'm afraid I can't tell from here.
I felt like he was worried I was getting bored because I couldn't ask active questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really worried that he was worried.
Yeah, you were worried that he was worried. But for an awful lot of people, they love being listened to like this. What else did you experience when you were doing the listening?
I think he would have stopped at the earlier point if I would have started asking questions. And now he dove a bit deeper into his thoughts, which was good.
So you went a bit deeper than he would have gone if you'd asked questions.
I think so.
Yeah. And a gentleman at the front here? So you wondered what actions you could do to try and get that question in without actually doing it. Did anyone find it uncomfortable when they were the listener? Few people. Yeah. Some people find that activity almost unbearable as the listener. Not me, but one of my colleagues has done this activity with a group, and somebody's actually walked out of the workshop because they said it was unreasonable. This was a full-day workshop, and it was the first activity. And they walked out. So it's ridiculous. You can't expect me to keep quiet for 2 minutes. Most people don't find it that uncomfortable, but a lot of people do find it quite difficult being in the listening role. And yet, when you are listened to like that, typical results include deepened rapport, increased trust, shared understanding, and this precious psychological safety that so many people are talking about. All of that can come about from being listened to. It's used in lots and lots of different circumstances, but this is one of my favourite stories about it. One of my workshops, I taught this to the group, and a father who was part of the group went home and tried it out with his teenage daughter. 2 minutes each way. He said, let's just try it, see how it is. Now, the girl was at that time, I think, 14, and they were not particularly having an easy relationship. They continued to do it pretty much every day because they'd enjoyed it so much. And a year later, they were still doing it. It was one of those conversations that was potentially life-changing for both of them. And I recommend it as an idea. However, it's not entirely straightforward. We can't necessarily set things up so every conversation is, I'll listen to you for 2 minutes, you listen to me for 2 minutes, and we won't interrupt. You can do it with your nearest and dearest, but not necessarily with all your teammates. But what if there was a way to build on that idea, to build all that rapport, trust, psychological safety and so forth, that didn't require the 2-minute setup? Well, it turns out that there is. mirroring, also known as paraphrasing. And that's the nearest thing that the FBI have to a Jedi mind trick, according to Chris Voss, who used to be the FBI's lead international hostage negotiator. Mirroring, or paraphrasing, is simply using the other person's words. Now, at this point in this talk, I used to introduce an activity in which you would listen to each other for 2 minutes, and as well as the nodding and the smiling and the gestures and the you used their words. But I stopped including it because people found it too uncomfortable. It was just too difficult to do. Now, it sounds ridiculous because surely it's just so simple, just to use the other person's words. But actually, to do it well can be quite tricky. When you do it well, it works brilliantly. Chris Voss tells the story, for example, of he's now an expensive American consultant and he has a yacht. He has a consultancy. And one of his consultants came to his yacht and wanted to influence him, wanted to persuade him of something. And what he found, well, what he did, this consultant, was he engaged Chris in conversation. Now, Chris's son was there on the yacht and listening into the conversation. And he started giggling. He started to laugh behind his hand. And he started to laugh louder and wink at the consultant, and Chris is just carrying on the conversation. It's all fine, everything's going on. And they were about 40 minutes in when the son finally just said, "Dad, aren't you noticing?" He said, "No." And the lad said, all he's been doing is mirroring back your words for 40 minutes. He has not said anything. He's just been mirroring your words. And I've had similar experiences myself. I was speaking at a conference in Bratislava earlier this year, and we'd just finished the activity where everybody was coming out of it saying, "Oh, that's too difficult, couldn't possibly do that in real life, just impossible." And one guy was really up in arms about it. He said, "Why have you wasted my time on that activity?" And I said, "Wasted your time?" And he said, yeah, no, that was ridiculous. You can't possibly use that to influence people. Yeah, it's ridiculous. You can't possibly. And gradually people around the room started to notice what I was doing. And the guy just kept on going. Yeah, and of course, when you really need to influence people, you need to tell them. You just need to get your point across as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible. And really influence them. And the room was starting to giggle. And we went on like this for about 5 minutes until I had to stop and just said, "Who's noticing what I've been doing?" And most people by that point had, except the guy himself. Because the thing is, when you use their words, they think that you are like them. They simply hear an unobtrusive, gentle, affirmation of what they've just said. What that does, when they think that you are like them, that means that they're likely to like you more. So using their words can make a profound difference. It's a way of indicating to them that you get them. Not only that, but after a while you do start to get them. Because as you repeat their words, you think, actually, if he says that, he must mean that. His internal world must be the kind of place where you have to talk first, for example. What must that be like? And as you use their words, you really do start to get them. as well as putting yourself in a position where they think that you get them. So this is also supported by academic research of some considerable renown. University of Nijmegen study, which has now been repeated over and over again in different places, and in a lot of the chain restaurants you'll hear this happen. Waitresses will now repeat back your order in your words rather than the words that were on the menu, because it's been demonstrated that it increases their tips. So it's worth a try. However, as I say, it can be quite difficult to do it for the first time. It can end up sort of messy, like broken eggs. And there is an easier way, which is to add questions. I'm going to show you some very simple questions. They're called the Lazy Jedi questions because they're an easy way of doing this Jedi mind trick. They actually have another reason for being called the Lazy Jedi questions as well, but they happen to be a really effective way of doing this Jedi mind trick. These questions have an X, and in that X spot, you use the other person's own words. And you can use the questions in any order as many times as you like. And I'm going to get you guys doing it, because some of you wanted in that last activity to use questions to direct attention, to focus in on the things that you were interested in. Well, let's give it a go. There are some business cards around the place, or you can read the questions from the PowerPoint. Here's how it's going to go. You're going to swap to a different partner if you possibly can, otherwise continue with the same one. Person A is going to talk about something that's important to them. Person B is going to encourage them, yes by nodding, yes by smiling, yes by mm-hmm, but use the Lazy Jedi questions. And let's see what happens. Making sense? Do you need a demonstration? Yeah, put the Lazy Jedi questions up again. Do we need a demonstration? If so, is there a microphone somewhere? Okay. Lizette, would you mind taking the mic?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you were to talk about quickly something important to you.
I really love the Ido Portal style of movement training.
I couldn't hear that. Could you hold the microphone?
I really love the Ido Portal style of movement training.
What kind of movement training?
Well, it's all kinds of movement training. Everything from yoga to dance to weightlifting to kettlebells, running, everything.
And is there anything else about kettlebells?
Well, they're easy and you can do them in a very small apartment. They're relatively inexpensive, except hard to move if you want to go anywhere else.
And is there anything else about movement?
I love the way that it makes me feel, and I love all the different experiences I have by trying new forms of movement.
What kind of experiences?
Well, like jumping really high onto really high platforms. I had never tried that before, but it was super fun to try. My trainer had to hold my hand, I'll admit, but it was super fun to try. I'd never tried jumping that high before.
Thank you. That's a brilliant demonstration. Really appreciate it. Sorry to spring that on you, but you were a brilliant demonstration subject. Get the idea? You can ask about anything, whether it's the first thing they said, the last thing they said, any of the words, jump about. You just get 2 minutes each way. Off you go. and swap over. How was that? Let's hear from a couple of people about their experience of what did you notice when you were being asked the questions? It's hard to ask the questions. Of course, you're doing something completely new. You've not done this before, unless you have done it before. No. But what was it like when you were being asked the questions? You never got a turn at being asked the questions. So a couple of people have got comments about what they were like when they were being asked.
Well, I heard from the previous training that they said they got more deeper knowledge about the subject, but when being asked questions, it made me think in other ways about my subject, because not only there was guidance, but there were guidance that made me reevaluate what I was talking about.
So there was guidance, it made you reevaluate what you were talking about, and it clearly went deeper. Yeah. And somebody further back? Same point. What if you are discovered? Won't the other person accuse you of trying to influence them? Well, it depends. So the implication of that question is that you're agreeing with me that actually to do this could be quite influential. Is that a controversial thing to say? You're using their words and you're guiding attention in particular ways. You're guiding attention potentially in a way that serves your purpose, not just their purpose. So yes, you could be being influential. When you're being influential, does that necessarily make you a bad person? Does it make you manipulative and evil? Or is it simply that you've got something important that you want to get across and you want to work with them, not on them, to find out the best way to a win-win solution? My recommendation with these questions is to do with rather than on. So, for example, to say, do you mind if I ask you some questions about that? And most people are very happy to talk more about what's important to them. they're very happy to help you to understand what's important to them. They're actually pleased that you're interested in what's important to them. And once you know what's important to them, then you can... There's a quote about listening. A good listener is not only popular everywhere, after a while he gets to know something. Fundamentally, when you pay attention, you get to learn lots of interesting stuff. So my suggestion would be not to use it in a way that is intended to be manipulative, but to use it in a way which is working with. I'm keeping one eye on the clock and racing quickly on. I want to share this quote with you. The source of those last two questions, the lazy Jedi questions, is an approach to precision inquiry called technically clean language. Have any of you ever heard Martin Burns speak? He's quite a well-known agilist. He speaks at lots of conferences of one kind or another, and he runs a consultancy in Scotland. And in an article he published last week, he said clean language is a shockingly simple approach that gets into a customer's head while significantly lightening our cognitive load so that we can actually hear the answers to our questions. That seems to me a lovely statement of why this is useful. That actually if we can get into someone's head while relaxing our head and really getting to understand them, we can hear them, it's going to make a difference. So what's clean language? It's a precision inquiry methodology, and it was optimized. It was originally created for working with difficult human stuff in complex situations. It was devised by the late David Grove, and in this particular instance, when I'm talking about clean language, I'm not talking about not swearing, and I'm not talking about the programming language called clean. Is there anyone here who programmed using clean? I've only once met someone who did. I know it. I believe it's now regarded as prehistoric. But this thing, clean language, is used in all sorts of interesting ways. For example, a team in Antarctica used it to understand each other and each other's ways of working really well. Now, this crew, they work for an environmental repair organisation. They're based in Australia, but every summer they go to Antarctica and spend 4 months on a base station, trapped, 60 of them together. That must be grim. And it used to be that this team used to every year, people would leave that base station and swear, I'm never going back. So the people managing this team thought, we need to do something. And what they did was use clean language. They introduced clean language as a way of helping these guys to get each other, to understand each other and their ways of working. And they did various formal exercises where they got the guys to interview each other using these questions. And there are various patterns that you can use. I do lots and lots of different team building stuff with clean language. It really helps teams to know each other on a very profound level when you do it used a lot. But these guys in Antarctica, the first team to use it when they came back at the end of 4 months, a much higher percentage than usual. The guy wouldn't give me the exact numbers, but he was beaming all over his face when he told me this. A much higher percentage than usual said they would love to come back next year. And when you think about the expense that must be involved in recruiting for going to Antarctica, you could see why he might be beaming. There are lots and lots of other stories to tell, and I'm going to run out of time if I do. But the most important, most relevant to this group, I think possibly, well, there are bunches of agile coaches now around the world that use it, Scrum Masters, and teams using agile approaches have grabbed hold of clean language and go, yes, this is exactly what we need. Because it provides that precision inquiry piece, which is used in a whole bunch of different contexts. In particular, stand-ups, retrospectives, and product reviews, these kind of contexts where you really need some questions which are non-judgmental, which help you to get the other person, and that's where these questions come in. Another way it gets used is in where people are doing sort of business analysis kind of stuff. One of my favorite stories is, again, quite old, but it predates the Agile revolution. This particular business analyst was just checking through some stories in advance of the building of a very large system to merge the software between two banks, a Dutch bank and a Belgian bank. And he's just doing these quick workshops, just sort out the details before we go ahead. All the bulk of the analysis work should have already been done. What he discovered was that there was a critical difference in the way the Dutch and the Belgians were using a particular piece of jargon, which meant they actually meant the word differently. And as a result, he understood that a whole bunch of the analysis work that had previously been done was simply mistaken and had to be put right. That moment was so dramatic that his bosses actually allowed us to publish the whole story and say, if it hadn't been for that workshop, it might well have gone down in history as one of those great IT failures that we read so much about and experience, where things go all the way to the end until the mistake has been discovered. So there are bunches of stories like this. And let me just quickly say, there are a couple of next steps if you're curious about clean language. There's a free ebook, Your Clean Language Questions Answered. There's also a paid-for video course with myself and Olaf Levitz, which basically compresses down some of these approaches into ways that Agile coaches and Agilists more generally might find them useful. But before we go to the end, I'm curious, how might you use these questions? What ideas have you got right now? And how is this relevant to the situation you thought about at the beginning, where there was somewhere where you needed them to get it? What relationships are you noticing right now? And are there any questions? Any questions? It has been studied in different languages, yes. Yeah, it's different languages have different challenges with it. So there is an official Swedish translation of the questions, which I was reluctant to introduce here, because my understanding is that it sounds very old-fashioned and extremely awkward. So I didn't want to add that into the complexity of the mixture. What's lovely about these questions is they try and strip out all presuppositions, all assumptions, and all metaphors as far as it's possible to do so. And different languages have different challenges with that. My understanding is that in Swedish it works reasonably well as long as you use the more modern formulation rather than the old-fashioned formulation, which is the official translation. It works brilliantly. One of the things I think happens is that obviously different nationalities have different national characteristics. Dutch people, for some reason, absolutely love clean language. Just go, yes, I'll have a dozen. In German, it's less easy to understand. They're sort of the edge cases. I think that Swedish fits somewhere in between. but they certainly do work in Swedish. So can you use this to make a complete 180? The answer is not necessarily in 2 minutes. And these questions are more appropriate to collaborative influence than simply to trying to change a Brexiter to a non-Brexiter. One of my friends, Brian Birch, has actually spent quite a lot of the last year online trying to use clean language questions to convince Brexiters to convert, with very moderate success. However, what can happen, what typically happens as you get to understand their point of view and they understand your point of view, that can spark all sorts of interesting new ideas. It helps people to build on each other's most creative ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you get them, they have respect for you, you can suggest something radical. Exactly so. One more question? How do you know when? That would be a whole other talk, I think. I think possibly all the indicators of rapport that you already know, body language and eye contact and smiling and all those kind of things. The other thing is that when you can gently move them and you can test it, when you introduce a little bit of you, you can test whether you can divert them even a few degrees. One of the things that I've been having fun with in my workshops this last week is using these questions and using the parrot phrasing, the mirroring, as a way of interrupting and stopping people from talking who are just talking too much and are completely dominating the conversation. And you can do that. You can just go, you just repeat their words and repeat their words and repeat their words, and then without pausing for breath, repeat, repeat, repeat. And I'm wondering if anybody else has. So you could do it the same. You could go and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and question and repeat and question, repeat, question, repeat. And then without pausing for a breath, I'm curious, have you considered this other small detail? So one of the most important things with these questions is not to use them for hour after hour after hour after hour. Though I do that when I'm coaching, for example, I will typically just use these questions for an hour's coaching session. But the trick is not to do that. The trick is to include them in the general conversation so that at each turn, the person has a hint that you are like them, that you like them, that you understand them, and keep that hint appearing all through the conversation. And the more you use these questions, the more that hint will appear. Anyone else? In which case, if you want to contact me, that's where to find me. I'm all over the internet. And it's been brilliant. Do please come and see myself and Steve, I think back in this room tomorrow at, I think it's 11:30ish, when we'll be talking about a completely different subject, which is remote meetings and how to make them not suck. See you tomorrow.